think I've seen most of you already, and that means you probably already tried these three. But I haven't taught you how to taste. I haven't taught you anything about these regions. So I'm Connor, owner of Chocolate Thunder. I've been doing this about 4 years. During the lockdown, my company was still in business. Not Chocolate Thunder, but I have a day job as an engineer. We were just told we had to go home, and I got a paycheck to explore other creative things. So I found out that there's children working in the cocoa supply chain unpaid. There's also adults unpaid. 70% of the world's cacao comes from Ghana and the Ivory Coast, where a lot of that is happening. So I, at that point, decided I would try to make chocolate myself. That's when I realized every single bean from every region of the world tastes different, and I had to share that with everyone I could meet. So I was running down the street, handing out chocolate to my neighbors. So what I have today are three very fruity origins. You probably tried them today. If you haven't, you probably tried other makers, single origins, and that's my favorite part of craft chocolate. So, anyone gone to a wine tasting before? Anyone a coffee origin person likes the tasting notes of coffee? It's just like that. Climate, soil, species. There's a lot of different species of cacao. That's all going to dictate what the flavors are. You have fermentation that's going to change the way the chocolate can taste. You have roasting that's going to change the way that it can taste. Even the refining process, when you add sugar, can change how fruity it is. You can lock in those flavors earlier or later. Volatile flavors can burn off over that time. Conching. A lot of the craft chocolate makers that are my size can't afford an expensive conch. Lindt is a big chocolate maker that has a fancy pneumatic vacuum conching machine that can suck the volatiles out of the chocolate in a second, in an assembly line. They tell you they conch it for days, but they don't. They're actually facing a lawsuit right now for that. But that can change the flavor too. So part of the way, there's a method for tasting, just like wine. You don't have to follow it. That's the thing about chocolate, is it's just fun, right? But the first thing that you would do for chocolate tasting is looking at it. So the one at the top here is Dak Nong Vietnam. These are samples that were poorly tempered, some of them. But you would be looking for a snap, so you're going to listen. And you should hear a snap when you break it. That means it's well tempered. If it doesn't snap, that means it's not well tempered, or maybe it's even a type 6 crystal. But the other thing you're looking at is if it's shiny. If you were just in the previous class, they were tempering chocolate in those molds. She said she likes it when they're shiny. That's when the cocoa butter ends up being a type 5 crystal, which is shiny. So those things have nothing to do with tasting, but they're going to indicate whether you're going to have a good experience or not. If it's dull, doesn't snap, you could have a type 6 crystal. You ever opened up a chocolate bar that's a year old and it's gray or kind of white? It's actually harmless to eat. You're just going to have a bad experience because the melting point of that crystal is like 106 degrees. So it's not going to melt the moment it hits your tongue. It's almost going to taste waxy or feel waxy. So those are indications of how it's going to go for you. The next thing you would do is sniff. And I will say for Vietnam, these beans smell like raisins. So when I first get a new batch of beans, I'll say, what does it smell like? Am I getting more brownie notes or am I getting fruity notes? And that's going to determine if I'm going to roast it longer to bring out more of the brownie notes, or if it's fruity like this one, I'm going to roast it really low. I want to keep all those notes, and that's just my opinion. So you sniff it. If you get really fancy, people will use wood tweezers for chocolate tasting so that they don't smell the oils on their own fingers. So you can get really fancy. Now the next thing you would do, there's two different ways you can taste chocolate, a lot of different ways, but two strategies. I like to taste it twice. So the first time I let the chocolate melt in my mouth, just purely. The second time I like to chew it up into little pieces, or even in the same time if there's more in my mouth, and taste all those pieces melted at once. If you just let it melt slowly, it's going to be different than kind of overwhelming your whole tongue with flavor. So if you don't taste anything in the method that you're using, try moving it around to a different part of your mouth or chewing it or something else. So with that being said, the first sample you have is Doc Nong Vietnam. Moreau Chocolate, they're a French company. They've been planting cacao in Vietnam, I think 15 years now. Small family farms coming together into fermentories. So there's beans from certain regions. This is Doc Nong. There are 4 others that taste similar, but they're very different in their own way. So Doc Nong, when you taste it, I'm actually not going to tell you what it is. So if you heard it earlier or you've already forgotten, great. But I want to hear what you guys taste as you taste it. So go ahead with the first one and just shout out what you taste. You don't have to shout, but. Raisins. Coffee. Cherry. I thought someone said cantaloupe, and then I just... Cantaloupe? That's cool. Yeah, you know what? There's no such thing as wrong either, because, you know, sometimes people look at me and they say, I don't taste that at all, and they just walk away. And, well, I don't know what to tell you. I have that experience with wine. You know, a sommelier is telling you what it tastes like, and you say, I don't taste it. But the advertised tasting notes of a lot of regions in Vietnam are going to be raisin, a lot of earthy notes. But these ones in particular are raisin. I think the way in which I roast it, I get some other flavors like fig and blackberry. But you also get, maybe where you were getting the smoky or the coffee might be more on the brown sugar and molasses, which I call out there. But yeah, there's no wrong answer. One of the most important steps, which we are not prepared for, but that's okay, time works too. When you're tasting chocolate, so if you bought any chocolate today and you want to have a tasting with your family who's not here, have water. You want to swish water between bites of chocolate. So that's going to cleanse your palate, nothing fancy to it. So if you have water, you can do that. But I think these 3, I picked them for that reason, are different enough that you won't be interfering from one to another. As long as we skip the middle one. So the middle one is Madagascar. We have to do that one last. So one more thing about Vietnam. This has been great for the agriculture in Vietnam. Cacao is an understory, under canopy tree. So it's short. They can get pretty tall, but they prefer to be in a little bit of the shade of other taller trees. So when you have a coconut tree grove and you're already using your land for coconuts, well, now you can come through and plant cacao under there and use your land for more than one thing. So they're doing a lot of that there. And honestly, that's one of my favorite origins. So on to the bottom one. The one on the bottom is Uganda. I think this one probably has a higher fat content because it's very smooth. So you'll notice that first. Cooperative of 5,000 farmers in Semiliki Forest, Uganda. That's the name of the region. I can't remember the name of the city right now. It's right on a lake. But they actually are called Latitude Cacao. They make chocolate at origin. It's a cooperative, like I said, so they are pooling their beans together. They're doing it themselves, exporting, representing themselves as a co-op of farmers to export rather than going through an intermediate. So that's really cool. I wish there was a cold chain there for them to ship their chocolate from origin to here. They do have a website. Every time I go on there, it says sold out, or maybe that's intentional for the U.S. market. But, so that's Uganda. So go ahead and try the bottom one there. I heard a good snap. I hear lots of good snaps. Fruity. Strawberry, cranberry. There's no wrong answer. Cheese. That's a unique flavor. It is on the cacao tasting wheel. Another thing that I forgot today. There's so many flavors. Some of them, cheese, people say is off-putting, or they may even say that it's a defect of fermentation. But in my opinion, sometimes cheese is good. Exactly, fruit and cheese. I think I brought my water in here. So the notes that I thought I was going to get from this when I sourced this, I got 2 pounds. I made a small sample. I was looking for a chocolate that would just be like brownies and straightforward cocoa flavor, because I do have a lot of fruity origins. It tasted like graham cracker and brownies, and it was incredible. I feel like they sent me the wrong sample, because this is clearly very fruity, but it's turned out to be a great origin. It just took me 6 months to stop being upset about it, to realize that it was great. So there's definitely, I get a lot of cherry. Cherry is like most popular thing people say, or fresh fig. That's what I always say, and people correct me, but everyone's different, right? Definitely like a chocolatey ganache, some sort of smooth chocolate, brownies maybe, but then a little bit of nuttiness. So those are the 3 things that I get most. But cranberry, that's another one I haven't heard in chocolate before, or cheese. There, I had a Anamale estate out of India that was like guava and peanuts, but there were a few people who kept on telling me it tasted like cheese and guava. I was like, don't call my chocolate cheese, but teach their own. Yeah, I know, and cheese goes with chocolate, but sometimes it's just, yeah. That'd be really good. Let's do that.
She said a white, like a gear or. Was it good?
All right. That one honestly tastes different every time I have it. And that brings up another thing. So a lot of times chocolate that's fresh out of the refiner, when you pour it, actually a few different points. The second that it's smooth, I'll put a spoon in there and try it. I'll try again later when it's completely smooth. When I add the sugar, I'll try it. If I made a chocolate that had unground sugar in it that was crunchy, that's going to taste different than with it smooth. When it's freshly poured, that is my favorite time to try chocolate. Maybe it has something to do with the rate at which it's going to melt, but it is freshly tempered chocolate. Like if you guys know Dustin's shop, find out when he's pouring bars and go in there and try to buy one fresh. The next day, it's already aged. And there are people that are aging chocolate. Ember Chocolate across from me over there, she ages her chocolate untempered for at least a month before she then tempers it. And that changes the flavor. Cocoa butter is very, it wants to absorb flavors. Yeah, so you have to be careful where you store it. But for that reason, people are putting them into wood boxes or cigar boxes or whiskey barrels, because you can age it the same way and again create even more different flavors. So I think the biggest name in that space, and they're getting $30 to $200 a bar, is Toak Chocolate, and they're aging their chocolate like it's whiskey for a year. I aged whiskey. For 6 months, I aged something in a whiskey barrel. And actually, it was too moist in there, so I can't melt the chocolate. It's seized. So I've just been shaving pieces off and eating it. Yeah. but still a work in progress. So the last one there, I had to leave it for last because John Nancy is the godfather of chocolate. He owns the Chocolate Alchemy website. He's been awesome the last 30 years. He was huge in just learning and getting small quantities of beans, equipment that you need. He sells everything you need to get started. Even as a hobbyist, that's where you can go. He shares recipes, he responds to emails, he's got videos. He describes this next one as, it will take your tongue, rip it out of your mouth, and smash it on the ground and stomp on it, because it just abuses your palate, which is why we have to taste it last. If you're drinking red wine, you get that tannin mouthfeel. Your tongue feels raw after a sip of red wine. This does that, and it lingers for a while, and it will actually mute the flavor of other bars. So you can go ahead and taste that. And this one would be fun to do blind too, because I usually always tell people what it is. But what are we getting? Nuts? Yep, that's yes. Cashew specifically.
It has like a vanilla creaminess to it.
Yeah. A weird taste? Yeah, 10. There's a lot going on. Oh, now you got cheese in their minds. Well, there you go, raspberry vinaigrette. That's almost perfect. Yes, this one especially for that. The predominant flavor is red berries, but I feel so when we buy cocoa beans, I'm small. A lot of these makers are smaller. Some of them are big enough to source directly from farms. A lot of us are using 3 importers, one of them being Cocoa Supply, a sponsor today. Meridian Cacao and Uncommon Cacao. So we order from them, and they give us an idea of what it's going to taste like because they've made a batch with it so they can sell it to us. They say red berries, and I feel like that's lazy because then I got to figure out which red berry it is. So, and I just try to throw a bunch out there. But raspberry, cherry, those are the 2 that I get. Strawberry banana I get this year. I've never gotten that before. But then cashew is one of the advertised tasting notes. Cinnamon and pepper. And I've only had 2 people ever pick out the cinnamon, 1 today. And cashew, or nuts, that was the first time anyone had picked out that without being told. So that's always fun to find out too. But miso? Yeah, and I feel like I'm at a disadvantage for tasting. And here I am leading the tasting. But I was a picky eater growing up. But just tasting chocolate when I got into this, it took about 20 bars, like 1 a week, before I really could start to just pick it out. And you got to have a tasting wheel, and that really helps. But when someone says a flavor, you may know what that tastes like, but you may not realize what we mean in chocolate when you taste that until someone can connect the dots. And then you know it instantly every time you taste it. Again, Ember, because I tried a lot of her stuff today. First time I've ever had chocolate where when they said leather, I could taste the leather. And I never knew what that meant. I thought it would be subtle. I can't remember the origin it is, but it screams leather in a good way. Because that doesn't sound appetizing, right? My favorite origin, I can't get any more. There was a cyclone that went through Fiji. Fiji had a chocolate that was, I described it as a barn. Yeah, like straw, like farm straw, but in a good way. Just like your red wines would have oaky It tasted like a hayride, and I feel like that'd be very off-putting to some people, but I can't explain it. These flavors, until you taste them in the right way, you don't realize that it can be good. Cheese. Cheese just doesn't, you don't want your chocolate to taste like cheese until you taste it and you say, oh, okay, I get it. But anyway, more about Madagascar. So this particular origin, I think most everybody has today. That is one of the most popular origins. I submitted this origin to the International Cocoa Awards or Chocolate Awards. I should not have done that. I don't know what I was thinking, because that's probably the most popular submission. And 70% Madagascar is the most popular. And I think because it's just so bright and fruity that people are drawn to it. It's the first thing you hear about. They say it's one of the most rare varieties of cacao in the world, but at this point it's overdone. But this is a single estate, so you've heard a single origin, could be a country, could be a region. This is the Sambarano Valley region of Madagascar, but it's also a single estate. The Akesson estate I think it's Italian owned, and the Bajofo estate within that estate is an even smaller section of their whole operation where these beans come from. So, I mean, you can go all the way down to the point where that whole farm might have the same variety of cacao, same species, same growing conditions, whereas that Vietnamese, they have different varieties over different family farms. Same thing with Uganda, 5,000 farmers. There's no way those all have the same conditions. So there's just so much going on in what's producing those flavors. Yeah. Yeah.
How long will the vendors be open so you can still go buy some more?
I think we close in an hour, 5 o'clock. We're going to start packing up.
That's going to push us.
Madagascar, these beans they follow organic practices. A lot of farmers, you'll find they don't pay for the certification. If they're smaller, they can't afford it. So they will say, we follow organic practices, but they can't list themselves as USDA organic. But I'm guessing everybody here is using the same sugar that I'm using, which is from Brazil, and it's USDA organic, because that's a giant operation and we're all using the same sugar. But, yeah.
Could you alter your type of sugar and also alter the flavor?
It changed the flavor a lot. I feel like that improved my chocolate probably by a factor of like 2 or 4, just finding the right sugar. So specifically Madagascar and Dak Nong were my first 2 origins, and I was using Costco raw organic cane sugar to start. And I noticed there was this flavor that was present in both the bars, and then I made an Ecuador bar, and it still had that same lingering flavor. So I did some research, and the brown color of that sugar is molasses. So there was that sugar was not just providing sweetness, it was providing flavor. So as I was researching, turns out everybody already knew the secret, and I just should have read better. But it was in the book that I have on display, and the cocoa bean supplier was selling that sugar. And I didn't even know that until after I bought a bunch from Amazon. But it comes from Brazil. It's vegan sugar. Not many people know that sugar, probably in Florida, like that white ultra-processed cane sugar. I know we have a lot of sugar up here too, but they process it through bone meal to filter it sometimes. This sugar from Brazil, they use a centrifuge to spin impurities out. They also don't burn their crops. So in Florida, sometimes they're burning the field to get rid of stuff and then harvest the sugar. They have a fancy electric-powered combine down there in Brazil. So they're harvesting the sugar. Long story to say that the sugar ends up being just sweet, not a lot of flavor. And when I switched, it was like suddenly these bars that were kind of borderline overlapping were very distinct. So, yeah.
Could you substitute honey with sugar?
Yeah, honey, what is it? Honeymoon chocolate down south. They do it But the challenge with honey is you can't put liquids into chocolate. I know it's not a liquid, but there is moisture in it. I know people have put a shot glass of bourbon in their refiner and it doesn't seize up. I'm too afraid to try and waste a whole batch of chocolate. But yeah, they're doing something special with their honey to make sure that they're able to get it to combine. Yeah, you get a different flavor. But that's the challenge is, I don't know if you have to freeze dry it or what. I've looked for like a crystallized honey and they end up putting like an anti-caking agent in it so it doesn't clump, and I don't want that in my chocolate. So I think those people, they benefit from having a farm or beehives, so they can probably just go right into it, dehydrate it, put it right in their chocolate without the honey rehydrating from moisture. Yeah, I made a maple sugar batch that I did not bring today, but there's a lot of things you can do with different sugars. Yeah. Yeah.
Several vendors that we saw today talked about you and said that like apparently Ugandan beans are hard to work with.
Oh.
And that yours was the best that they've had. So
I heard that too, but again, I think I said this a couple times today that I'm not doing anything special. You know?
they said you're doing something different because they like at least two people I talked to were like, we can't use this particular origin because it's always a disaster.
Interesting.
But somehow you figured out the secret sauce.
Madagascar, I've had the longest, and I've messed with the most. Uganda, I've only been working with it this year, and I've only tried one roast. And I don't know. I just follow the rules. I don't have enough time because I'm such a small operation. I don't have time to experiment. That costs money to make a batch that you might not like. I have a full-time job, so most of the time it's my super part-time employee that would have to do something like that, so I wouldn't even get to taste it until like late at night. And yeah, so I don't have time to experiment like I used to. I guess I just hit it right the first time. But if I taste a bean and it's tasting fruity, I'll just lightly roast it, and usually it works out. And if it doesn't, you just, I don't know, add 30 seconds, take away 30 seconds, see what happens next time. So, yeah. Cool. Well, any other questions? Cool. Yeah, I don't want to stop you guys from going and getting some more. There's an hour left, so thanks for having me.